Well, thank you, everyone, and thank you so much for having me tonight. And Tracy, thank you so much for having Badger Talks a part of your programming tonight. I'd like to honor Allison John Jack. I am not her. She is a wonderful Cranberry outreach specialist who put this wonderful program together tonight. Under other circumstances, she would be here, but she was not able to, and so she asked if I would be able to present in her place. So before we dive in, I've done some public speaking before, and I really like to get to know my audience before we start talking cranberries, because the moment we start talking, I can often find your questions bubbling up to the surface. So just by a raise of hands, has anyone ever been on a cranberry marsh before? Okay, so maybe 10% of the group, maybe 20%. Okay. By a raise of hands, who knows that cranberries do not grow in water? Okay, so half the group knows that they do not grow in water. The third question would be, how many of you know that Wisconsin is the #1 growing state for growing cranberries? All right, that's great, okay. So let's dive into our program tonight. So Allison John Jack, like I said, whoops, I forgot to turn the power off. Let's print. Put together this wonderful presentation, and this is Allison right here in the picture. And I really like this picture of her because she's in the field and she's in action. And the reason I chose this particular picture is the reason her and I know each other is from different capacities. So she is an outreach specialist, and I'm a cranberry grower. So oftentimes I will be participating in workshops or programs or presentations that she's putting on, like today, but more targeted for the cranberry grower community. So for example, tomorrow she's leading a brown bag workshop. So it's from 12 to 1, and cranberry growers then zoom in on our computers or on our cell phone. So I will watch using my smartphone. Our manager will listen using his phone. But either way, we find different ways to be able to meet the cranberry growers where they are. They might be listening from a dump truck, or they might be driving to and from their different farms or so on. So she puts on these wonderful workshops for us to help us be our best prepared and make sure that we have the best knowledge and the best resources so that we can grow the best berries. So in this particular picture, it not only shows that she's in the field working, but it also shows that as a UW Extension outreach specialist, she has partnered with Cranberry Learning to find different ways where we can bring our nonprofit into learning spaces that collaborate or accompany what she's doing as well. So we thought, you know what, why not highlight and spotlight a career like hers? So part of Cranberry Learning is emphasizing that we are not only interested in teaching about cranberry learning in different learning spaces, but we are also very eager on growing the next generation of farmers and agriculturalists. And how do you do that? It's successional generational cranberry growing is evolving. And what I mean by that is we have a population that isn't working as often anymore in agriculture, and they may want to work in the city, or they may want to live where they have better internet, or they may want to live where they have better access to amenities. And so we're trying to find ways to fill this workforce crisis, if you will. And so we think the best way to be able to show how you can be a part of agriculture is through different jobs. And so this is one example of a career spotlight, where Cranberry Learning is showing the different components of cranberry careers that you can see yourself in. So in other words, you don't have to grow up near a cranberry farm, and you don't have to marry someone to be able to be part of this wonderful cranberry industry. So we're really happy and pleased as a cranberry industry that we have resources with UW and UW Extension, and that we have such a talented asset as we have with Allison. So she's not only a wonderful scientist, but she's also a cranberry kid. And what I mean by that is cranberry kid is someone who either was born into cranberry families or grew up on a cranberry marsh. So we know a lot about cranberries. So this is just a little blurb about me. I'm from a generational cranberry marsh. What makes my farm different and a little unique is that the founding fathers of our farm are called the Gaynor brothers, John and James Gaynor. And we're going to learn a little bit more about their impact in a little bit later part of our presentation. What's unique about my farm is that, like a lot of American stories in history, there's love and there's tragedy. And tragically, they didn't have children to be able to have a succession plan. They didn't live long enough. And at the time, you couldn't give your farm to your daughter because women couldn't put their names on land deeds. So you only had the option for your sons. And so what happens when you don't have a succession plan? Well, as it may be, my great-grandfather, Charles Dempsey, was allowed to work as a 9-year-old in the 1890s because you were allowed to do so. We'll see some pictures of that, not of him, but of other diverse groups of labor on cranberry marshes. And he was working so young because his mother, my great-great-grandmother, was a widow. She's here from Germany. She finds herself raising 3 kids on her own. English is not her first language. What do you do? So she walks her children to work. So she walks the 20 miles, 15 miles, whatever it is, from Pittsville to Cranmore, and they live on the marsh for the week. And then they get a ride or they walk back, they get their bread, they probably go to church, and then they come back and they work. Every week they're doing that. So what do you do with the kids? Well, you send the boy outside. He becomes the farmhand and the shadow. And then the girls became the cooks and the cleaners and things that you do inside the house. So fast forward, when Gaynor Brothers were looking at figuring out what they were going to do, it was actually Mrs. Gaynor, the living heir, said, well, I think Charles Dempsey, the boy who's now in his 20s, I think this is our best option. So it's really profound in this time era just to help us walk back in time, that you could be a child, I don't want to say slave labor, but you could be a child laborer and essentially end up inheriting a farm. Like, that is an amazing American story. And there's a lot of this cultural and social impact that we're going to see in the cranberry history line, all the way from its native growth to where we are now. There's a lot of different lives and communities that cranberries have touched, and I particularly think that cranberries are a great symbol of agriculture here in America. So enough about me. So how did Wisconsin become the best? So it's a little crash course, as I mentioned, in geography, climate, sociology, and farming culture of Wisconsin. And this map is lovely, I love it. It just came out by our Wisconsin State Cranberry Growers Association. And what they did was they showed us the different counties in Wisconsin, and then they highlighted the cranberry counties in Wisconsin. And then the different color variations show the number of acres per county. So the number of vines in the acres. So it looks like Wood County, where I'm from, is the largest area of vines in Wisconsin. So we are very cran-centric where we live. So the big question is why do cranberries grow so well in Wisconsin? So we're going to answer part of that here in the environmental side of it. So clearly glaciers were not able to be photographed in Wisconsin because the camera didn't exist. But this was taken in a glacier in Alaska, so it just gives us the image of what a glacier looks like and what it does to the earth as it bulldozes through. So Wisconsin, we all know that Wisconsin had glaciers that came through, and it gave us a gift after she left, after she melted and made her way through. She left sandy soil, she left clay, she left heavy red clay, swamp soil, we would probably call that peat, and so on. So when you look at cranberry counties and then the soil profiles, you start to see a trend. And this trend is what allows our cranberry counties to grow so well and why they're so successful in Wisconsin. So this is a picture, and I'm going to see if I pronounce this right. This is where Allison is our scientist, and she knows all things science and cran science. But this, does anyone know what this is? A picture? Moss. It is moss. Let's see if anyone can help me pronounce this right. Sphagnum, thank you, moss. So this is the very first form of life that was grown in the peat soil after the glaciers came through. So this moss, it lives and it dies, and then it more or less compresses into that glacial peat. So it's a high nutrient peaty soil. So at this point in Newfoundland, Canada, they're starting to see more images like this. This is peat. And then from here, you get this high bush. So then how in the world do you get this high bush? How do you get this vine from this moss and the peat? I have to ask myself the same question. How does this work? So again, I'm not a scientist, so I'm going to break this down in the way that I best know how to describe. So you have this peaty soil back up here, and it's really organic, and things are trying to survive. So only the survival of the fittest works in this scenario. So these high bush vines figure out how to survive by reaching into the soil for nutrients. And they have the ability to grab nutrients. I'm going to fast forward here a little bit. They have the ability to grab nitrogen. That's what this line is right here. Whereas if you were corn, you wouldn't be able to grab it. So they have this ability, this robustness to be able to grab special things in the soil that help you grow that no other plant can do. So it pushes their strength and their vitality to be able to push and grow. So then you have the root system. And in this root system, you have fungi. So then this is where the relationship begins. It's really fun. So isn't life all about relationships? I mean, culture is about relationships. Agriculture is about relationships. We have relationships with soil and water. So now we've got this really cool thing happening in the root system where the fungi, when they get hungry, they send a signal out to the plant. And they say, plant, I'm hungry. So then they send out the signal, and then they want to do a trade. So I want you to remember this because trading has begun in cranberries before they were even traded by humans. So then the fungi, they need, they're trading friends basically with the root system. So the roots give the fungi sugar that they need, and then the fungi gives the root system phosphorus. So then they trade off, and then before you know it, you've got this root system that's growing. So essentially, we're going to go back up. These pretty slides that Allison gave us shows that there's different soil profiles in the state. These are all really old maps, but it's showing that over time, as we were engineering the state, we were studying how is it that they're natively grown. So we just described peat soil created this wonderful growing environment, and then before you know it, you've got these natively grown plants. But then society said, wait a minute. We don't really know what we're looking at. So then this is, I'm not really sure what this is dated. Allison knows this, I'm not sure if it's on here, but it says here, marsh unfit for cultivation. So at some point, someone took a look at, I think this is up in Vilas County, and made an assessment, and then we all know that when you assess land, it goes with the price and a value. So now we have people moving into Wisconsin and trying to figure out where they want to live. But what are you going to do? How are you going to make money? So then you've got families thinking, well, I know how to lumber, or I know how to dairy. I'm Dutch, I'm Irish, I'm German, and this is what I know, and this is what I'm bringing to my new area. So these lands were bought up by people who either saw value or didn't know what they were buying, and then they said, hey, wait a minute, I bought this land for one reason, but it's too wet, or I can't access it because it's too wooded. And then I noticed that people are picking berries around here. Oh, this is the fun picture of the relationship. So then they said, well, wait a minute. I noticed that there's Native Americans and tribal nations that are picking these cranberries, or these berries on this vine. Like, what are these things? So here's the next fun trivia question. Does anyone know how cranberry got their name? That's right, the cranberry. So the early settlers, and this is a really fun and interesting conversation piece that we could probably sidestep in a whole different direction. But why is it that there wasn't one name for a cranberry? Wouldn't you think that if Native Americans were giving cranberries to as a trade item, or they were showing early settlers where to pick them or how to pick them? The fact of the matter is each tribe had their own language. And then you have different immigration communities coming through with their own language. So I think subsequently the cranberry stuck because the blossom of the cranberry looks very similar to the head of a sandhill crane. There you get cranberry. So segueing into, this is from the Lakudere tribal nation up in the Vilas County. So this is work that Allison has done, and her work has found history that we all are very familiar with, but it's understandable that she made a note down here that, for example, Ho-Chunk Nation, the tribe that's in my area, probably has similar stories, but until we get their first-hand account, we're going to just focus on the tribal nation that has affirmed this. I'm sure it's very similar, but we also honor that each tribe and each community has their own approach to their history and their heritage to the world around them. So I think you pronounce this Mushki Gimin. And so it's a breakup of marshy land and berries, so marsh berries, if I have that translation right. So as we know, we were taught that Native Americans found value in their culinary purposes. They were also used dried and smoked. They were also used in sauces, and they're also used in a meat preserver, food preserver, and that. And this is not a word I say very often, so maybe someone else can help me with this, with the P word. Is it pemmican? Pemmican. Pemmican. There we go. So that's a critical point that we're also going to see in the future of the cranberry that's going to come back and show us how valuable that effort was, in addition to the medicinal uses. So first, Wisconsin's first commercial marshes. So from being natively grown to commercially grown, we see a difference in the yields because we start to analyze the value of the cranberry, and if you can show more interest and more reason to have cranberries in your diet, then there's going to be more reason to grow them. And so this is where we're starting to see early settlers coming in and saying, you know, this land costs me a lot of money. I need to be able to make a profit. It's seasonal. I need to really maximize my opportunity. So this is where the fun begins with the cultivation of cranberries in a way that it's never been done before. So this is 6 BB/A means 6 barrels an acre. So 1 barrel equals how many pounds? Does anyone know if you filled a cranberry barrel from the floor to the top of it? It's 100 pounds. So they brilliantly designed these barrels to carry 100 pounds of cranberries, and that's how they originally measured them. And remember, they were only sold as fresh fruit. And does anyone know why they were only sold as fresh fruit? There was no refrigeration, there was no technology, there wasn't, we hadn't quite advanced yet. This is a picture from a history book at our cranberry marsh. We have a space called the Heritage Room that we've preserved. Our farm has hosted the very first UW research station. And this is volume 3, and volume 3 dates from 1890 to 1917. And what they would do is the scientists would collect these vines from all over. When I say all over, from original growing areas in the Berlin area, New Berlin area, as far east as Massachusetts and New Jersey. So they would scientifically, categorically parcel them off and plant them in different plots. And then they would evaluate different attributes at the end of their harvest. So for example, they would look at the size, or the color, or the form, or the gloss, or the uniformity, or the keeping quality, or the firmness, and so on and so forth. Did I say color in there? And then these right here are cranberries cut in half. So they're stamps of cranberries. So they would evaluate year by year, and you can see where, is this a pointer? That's maybe not. But on the left, on the far left column, you can see where they hand wrote 1903. And then after that, there was someone must have invented a stamp because they quit writing the year and then they stamped the year. But it goes year by year, and then what they're looking at is they're rating the number and the size. They're trying to maximize these different vine varieties for the best quality. When you look over here, once they figured out, the Gaynor brothers figured out, wait a minute, we need to really maximize. Again, this is like a new way of doing farming. And they came in and said, we have a lot of debt. We really need to make some money here. And so they said, these buyers are coming up from Chicago, and they're offering us different prices. And we need to figure this out so that we have a uniform schedule on what to expect on both ends. And so they came up with this rules for branding. So they took out different varietals and put them into different categories based on different attributes. So they would use different measuring cups, different grades to sort them by, and they would then sell them on different prices. And then as they were selling them to the market, they would put the label on the box, and then the buyer knew what they were getting. So Badger brand was indicative of a certain quality. They even have a Gainer brand, so it's a mixed. So it's brilliant. One thing that it tells me right here is that why in the world did we sort the white berries out? They're not so pretty. And in the market of fresh fruit, you're selling pretty berries. That's part of the branding system. So we kind of did it to ourselves because now we've recognized over science and time that white berries are just as good and just as healthy as the red berries. They just didn't have sun exposure. They got the same juice, or not the same juice, the same water. They got the same food. They were all treated equal. But it's just that they were on the bottom part of the canopy and they didn't get the sun, so all of a sudden they're blush or they're pink or they're not quite as red. So when we were selling cranberries in the fresh fruit market, we wanted the best berries, and then the berries that weren't the best got the lower price. So now we're trying to, in the fast forward age of what do we do with the white berries? And so now we're making kid juice, and we're making white cranberry juice and pineapple mango juice and things like that where we can use the white berries and so on and so forth. But to this day, the consumer still thinks that two things: cranberries do not grow in water. They think that because of the beautiful pictures we're going to see at harvest. And then they think that all cranberries grow red because we package them that way. But that's not, Mother Nature works differently, doesn't she? So this is the packing house in the fresh fruit world. This is the cranberry barrel right here. This is a division of labor picture. So women were the sorters and the men were the pickers. So then you fast forward to 2018, and the state average is now 268 barrels an acre versus the original 6. So that is a huge advancement in our industry, and that's why we are the nation's #1 leader. We went from picking them to cultivating them, and we understood that precision farming will allow us to maximize our yields. So that's why it looks so pretty, so pristine, and we use scientists like UW-Madison, UW Extension to help us understand how we can maximize our yields with the least amount of impact. So impacts like Mother Nature, fires. This is another reason why we've moved towards different practices on cultivating cranberries. They were originally just kind of naturally growing as they will, and we recognized that if we wanted to do crop protection in addition to crop production, we needed to have better access to water. So we started to ditch the cranberries beds in ways that we could better frost protect and then also protect against the droughts that were occurring in the early 1900s, which prompted fires. We also use water, which is another wonderful gift that Wisconsin has. And this is just a picture of, a lot of times people say, is this your off season? And we say, well, in Cranberry World, we farm every single day of the year. And in winter, we have a farming practice. So it's called flooding and sanding. So this picture shows that we've had cold enough weather and enough water to be able to flood a cranberry bed. It's broken there. It's probably a big ditch or something like that. But it also shows that there's a gap. And this gap where the ice is broken, you can visualize those vines underneath. So I really like to say that cranberries are like sleeping beauties. And our sleeping beauties, they grow and then they need to take a rest. And they grow and then they take a rest. So when people say, well, how come they can't grow in California? Well, now we know, and now you can tell them, well, do they have soil like that of Wisconsin after the glaciers? Do you have access to water to be able to protect and to help them grow? Do you have the ability to use your natural resources like we have in Wisconsin? So this is where, and they have to go to sleep, so it has to be cold enough for them to go to sleep, cold enough in the sun exposure. So this is a fun picture of a census in 1905. Allison put that in there because I think of the nature of tonight's audience, just neat to see. But I'm not exactly sure what we're looking. I think the people, according, I can't really read this though. Oh, ethnic. Yeah. So this really just shows how important immigration was to Wisconsin. And it also shows the efforts Wisconsin took to draw people to Wisconsin. So if they're advertising, we have land available, then who's catching that advertisement? Who's thinking I can see myself in Wisconsin? So I think when you look at our communities in Wisconsin, I think it's really important to highlight how different we are compared to other states in America, because in Wisconsin we are very agri-community centric here. And no matter where you go in Wisconsin, you can see trends in culture and in farming when you start to see the two together. So there's communities of dairy farms, there's communities of cranberry growing, there's just different types of farming that you can see follow through those cultural trades. This is a really cool song, and I wouldn't even begin to sing it. It would be fun to hear the tune on it, but it also just emphasizes we all get along, Bohemians and Irish, Yankees and Dutch, in the cranberry bogs you will find the whole clutch. When the hay is cut and the wheat is stacked, cranberries ripen, so our clothes will pack. And away to the marshes we rake we will go, and dance to the music of fiddle and bow, and so on and so forth. And I was just telling a friend of mine who is working on integrating culture and music, and I said, have you ever considered food systems as part of your cultural layers? And she said, no, I never thought about that. And I said, well, I know whenever I go outside at harvest, I can hear some Latin music, because we have a diverse group of people that work throughout the year. In the springtime, we work with another group of agriculturalists who help us with our weed control. So they will hand pull the weeds, and I can hear some of their Hmong music when I go out there. When I look at our history and I look back at some of the entertaining times when it's in between frost or in between seasons, it's almost always including a fiddle party. So I said, I think there's something to be said about music and agriculture and the people behind it. This is one of Allison's favorite shirts. I love that she added this to her program. It's the boots. We always think of the waders when we think of harvest. Again, cranberries do not grow in water, but we flood the beds because cranberries float. And I love that this picture shows the 4 hollow pockets. It's got the seeds on the inside. Someone asked earlier, if you had a bucket of cranberries and you threw them out in your field, would they naturally grow? In Wisconsin, maybe. I mean, it's not to say the seeds wouldn't have an effect, but they would grow stronger if you kept them on their vine. As we learned earlier, it's the activity on the vine that really helps the regrowth, but it's really those 4 hollow pockets that allow them to be buoyant. And of course, our pretty sandhill crane. So now we're going to move into the culture of innovation. We have learned from early stages to modern stages how important the use of water is and how important it is to continue to evolve our technology. So this picture just shows really how naturally marshy it was and how they were hand picking. But you can do a lot more picking with a tool than with your hands. And so now we've evolved into hand rakes. And we have a ton of these drying racks still at our marsh, and they're all stacked up, so there's different beds all within. You can see a ditch here, and this is called a dike. And then you have the really pretty, now we've recognized, wait a minute, if we even use more water to float them up a little bit more, and as we pick, they'll float as we raise the water. So that's what this picture's showing. So now we're hand raking and using the waterways with our culverts and our ditches to bring in a little bit more water. These are beautiful handcrafted engineered designs. My grandpa has these in his office as well. I wish I knew where these were dated 1954. It's probably from, oh, it's a Getzinger. Yep, this is the Getzinger machine. He was our neighbor. So a lot of cranberry growers were also self-made engineers, civil engineers, mechanical engineers. Hardly any of them had a technical degree to show how smart they were, but they were brilliant. So classic work smarter, not harder. And that's what cranberry growers are really known for, is saying, hey, wait a minute. We've got too much on the line. We have too much that we need to preserve and protect. We've got to be able to do this more efficiently. There's always pressures, whether it's economic or it's environmental or Mother Nature. You've got a family to support, so on and so forth. So we're always looking for ways to be able to save money and do things more efficiently. So it went from hand picking, so now it's, this is a walk behind picker. Now we're sit on one, and it's mechanical. And here's Allison. I reckon it took me I'm pretty sure that's her right there. She looks young. And there's a beater, by the way. This machine is beating, so it's kind of got a real implement on the front. So as the machine, and look at how fat and soft those tires are. So it just softly goes over those vines. They're robust and strong enough for a machine to lightly, only one time, go over the vines. And then we evolve. Whoops, went the wrong direction. And this is called an elevator. So now we've got them all corralled in, and they're getting elevated up, just like an escalator. I don't know if anyone recognizes this fellow from behind, but this is Charlie Berens, the comedian. So he made a cameo. But what we're really looking at here is the harrow machine. So it's a tractor with the implement on the front, and they're more or less modern day tines from the hand picker, but on the tractor. So think of our Sleeping Beauties. Remember, they're beautiful and they like to sleep, but she has long hair. So when you put the harrow machine over her, it's like you're combing her hair. And as you're combing her hair, the berries just pluck right off. And as we're raising the water, then the waters will naturally float to the surface. And then this is a berry pump. So this is what we use in our marsh. And why change from an elevator to a pump? It's more time efficient. So everything is money. So the longer you have to pay, your crew is there, the longer you have to pay them. So you want to be able to pump as many berries out into your receiving station as possible. You're also fighting the weather. So you're trying to get as many trucks in before the sun sets and before the weather freezes. So essentially there's a pump that you can't see under here, and it's a suction pump, and it'll suck the berries up through these pipes, these stainless steel pipes, and that goes up into the cleaner. And then the berries go one direction, and then the items that you don't want in your cranberries, like leaves and debris, go in the other truck. So we'll use that as a compost material, and then our cranberries go off to a handler. So I'm Ocean Spray, and Ocean Spray has a report card for us. And they say, we will pay you a good price for your fruit, but we will not pay you for leaves. We will not pay you for extra water in your bin. We want you to make sure that there's no trash, no debris of any kind. And we don't want any rotten berries. So we're gonna measure samples of your fruit when you come in, and then we're gonna grade you on this. So we get these report cards immediately. So then we can make adjustments on our cleaner. If it's working too fast or too slow, we can work with that a little bit to make sure that it's doing its job. So now we are moving into innovation through technology, through our agronomy, and also through our business practices. So eat more. Eat more cranberry is the way that we sold our fruit as fresh fruit originally. And so it shows, this graph shows 1910, but remember my marsh started in 1876. So the cranberries have been sold as fresh fruit for as long as possible until the market changed. And what changed in the market? That's a really good guess, but there was one other instrumental product that came. Refrigeration. But even before refrigeration, canning. We already knew cranberry sauce was delicious, but how are we going to get that sauce to last longer on the shelf? So Ocean Spray, one of their founders, was a canner. So they introduced cranberry sauce that everybody loves and put it in a can. Now you can sell it further and it can sit on the shelf longer. That's pretty brilliant. That's where you start to see a shift and change from cultivation of fresh fruit to consumer packaged goods, CPG. So we already talked about the Gaynor brothers and how John Gaynor, Judge John A. Gaynor, was instrumental. His brother was more of the scientist and he was more of the businessman. So he understood law, he understood business dynamics. So he not only put together this labeling system for our fruit. Oh, and by the way, this is called a quarter barrel. Let's not forget about this, white elephant in the room. So 100 pounds in a barrel is really hard to move. It's not efficient on a train car, right? And it's round. So 25 pounds, anyone can carry 25 pounds, and it's a lot more efficient because it's square. So that's what this is called, is a quarter barrel. So same labeling process, just smaller. So then eventually they said, hey, look, you guys out on the East Coast, we're on to something here. Join our party. So then they eventually became the American Cranberry Exchange. And then that became a point of differentiation. So if you wanted your fresh fruit, you would get it through the American Cranberry Exchange. If you wanted a packaged good, you would go through Cranberries. But as we know in agriculture, and as we know in just how our lives have evolved, supply and demand move the compass. So as more people became accustomed to the sauce and grew the demand for the juice that eventually came into play, that more people were incented to say, hey, I get more money if I sell the Ocean Spray because they're giving me more money back to me because they have juice and they have sauce, whereas I'm only getting X amount of dollars with this fresh fruit. I don't get any added value from that. So that's something that we really, as an Ocean Spray grower, we're really proud of, that we can say our fruit goes into so many different products and we're able to follow it from our farm all the way around the world and then some. So this is the cooperative structure, and essentially, in all the words, it means that we have a vested interest. Growers, like myself, have a vested interest to see Ocean Spray succeed. So we supply the fruit that Ocean Spray sells. We hire a management team that will help us market the fruit, promote the fruit, but we also have a seat at the table. So on the board of directors, oh gosh, I'm not going to give you numbers, but it's majority all Ocean Spray growers that represent different growing states and regions between the U.S., Canada, and Chile. And then they have 2 or 3 non-voting, non-grower professionals that will help guide. And I love this picture because I had never seen this before, but as Allison and I were going through her presentation, I was like, oh my gosh, it says Gainer's Farm. So this house, the White House, has since burnt down. We have pictures of it burning. Fires were very, very prominent, which is why I think it's really special that our farm has been able, or any farm can hold on to history. I think it's also really special to see and highlight that in our cranberry world, we saw value in coming together as a community to work together. So Mr. Gainer and his brothers, along with the other pioneer cranberry growers in Cranmore, said, in addition to the sales, we have to work together as neighbors. Our water is shared. Like, we have no excuse and all the reason to be friends with each other and help each other out. And they also understood that there was very few people that had a handle on the market. So they had power in their mind structure to say, we have the ability to control our destiny. So let's work together. Let's make sure that we are raising each other up and not building each other down. So they would get together every summer. And I think the Gainer brothers started the association in the 1880s, something like that. I have a history book out on the table if anyone wants to take a look. But they would not only bring the men together, they would bring the wives and the children together. Some of the families lived right on the farm, but this is very, very rural areas. So oftentimes the families would be separated for a period of time where they might live more in the metro area. But having the families come out to the marsh all together, dressed up, I just think this is a really profound picture. It just really exemplifies that this was a family business. Even though it's a growing agribusiness, it was still family. And then today, we get together in our summers, and we still have, I think we're in our 130th summer annual meeting with growers. And it's not just with Ocean Spray, it's growers of all handlers. And we get together and we talk about crops and equipment and how do you grow and what's your tip and things like that. So we've talked about how the East Coast joined and how we started to see Wisconsin's cranberry shares go up. So that's a big question. A lot of people say, well, I thought Massachusetts was the national leader because that's where Ocean Spray started. So there's this branded imagery that cranberries are only on the East Coast. And we have something to celebrate in Wisconsin because we've done, there's a reason we have become #1. So the glaciers gave us a gift of resources, And then we took the knowledge and we took the understanding and we took the grit and we said, hey, we're going to make something of this. We also, by gift of nature, don't have the pressures that East Coast communities have. So when I just emphasize how rural we are, they are not. So they may have neighborhoods that butt up to their farms. They may not have been able to square off their beds like we have. So the picture on the top is from Massachusetts and the picture on the bottom is from Wisconsin. So doing precision farming, in other words, is very difficult when you're working with round versus symmetrical. So they can't, their beds aren't, so you don't want to overspray. You're going to kill the plant and it's not good for the environment of any kind. So you only want to spray where and when you need it. And that's our initiative. We're land takers. We know that our lands are special and we have to take care of our soil and our water. So we are very, very mindful about the impacts and inputs that we give to our cranberries to feed them and protect them. Now, in Massachusetts, for example, they may not have the ability to have these dikes. And they may have to use a helicopter to fly on their fertilizer. But now they have to be at the mercy of the helicopter flight plan. They have to be at the mercy of Mother Nature, make sure it's not too windy. So critical windows of time are not in your favor anymore. And plus, it's not as precise. So that's one of the other reasons that we're really proud in Wisconsin to say that we can sustainably grow our cranberries in a way where it's still doing the job for all of us. I love this part of her program. It just shows that we invest in ourselves and we are part of an industry that we have a vested interest and we still take part. So it's not uncommon to see generations at Cranberry School that we have in January. We have, like I said, the summer picnics in August. And then we also have a very active membership. So of the how many? I think there's 250 growers in Wisconsin and I think there's like a 90% rate of membership at our Growers Association. So that translates to cranberry growers value being a member of our association and being a part of United Group and being involved. So that's what this graph says. Yes, has someone in your family been a part of any of these boards? And the answer is yes. My sister's currently on the Grower Council board and she's starting to be more involved with Ocean Spray. And her and I have both served on our Growers Association's board of directors. And that leadership program that we just highlighted, that's through the UW Extension. And I'm extraordinarily proud of that because I don't know if anyone's heard of Leadership Wisconsin, but it was a UW Extension program maybe 10 years ago. And I think it's in its new phases. But what I learned from that program is that we need one for cranberries. So I went back to our association and said, I think we need to find some money and find some resources and find a way where we can develop a program so we can develop ourselves. So now you fast forward and we have presidents of our association saying that how much they value that leadership program, and it just makes my heart tickle pink that we're still inventing ourselves, we're still improving ourselves, we're still pushing ourselves forward. We're still dealing with the climate as well. This is a picture of 50 below zero. I don't know what year this was. I can't see that anywhere, but a while ago. And climate can hurt us and it can help us. So in really cold climates, we can flood, we can freeze, put that blanket of flood over our sleeping beauties. It might kill off some pesky bugs and things like that. But if climate isn't in our favor, it could be detrimental. So last year, our winter was totally different than it was this year, and it was really warm. So we couldn't hardly get a flood on, and if we did, it melted. And we had to, remember, we have to manage our water. Our cranberries don't grow in water, which means we can kill them if they're underwater too long, even when they're sleeping. So we have to be mindful what the temperature is and how it's gonna work for us or not work for us. So cranberry growers are scientists, they're engineers, and we're meteorologists. So the org chart, this is really fun just to show a career pathway on Allison's side and her team. All of the names on this list, every single person has made an instrumental impact to the world of cranberry in a positive way. They are looking at helping us with the bug control. They're helping us with the vine vitality. They're helping us understand how to better protect with frost scenarios, how to better use our water. So one of the neatest things that we've learned in the last 10, 15 years is we know that cranberries don't grow in water. And we know that they like to grow in a dry, sandy soil. So now we're implementing, and when we renovate, we'll put more drain tile in. But we're also using different tools to help us understand, should we or shouldn't we irrigate? Like, how thirsty are they? How long should I irrigate for? So we're starting to change that mindset of, we know they're thirsty, we know it's hot outside, but do we turn it on an hour later? Do we turn it off? We're starting to study the measurement of their vine vitality and their growth and their root renewal with the water, with different probes. And these are the kinds of amazing things that we're learning from our scientists, and they're also pushing us forward with new vine varietals. So back to the screen that I had with the chart of the cranberries cut in half, that is the very original of what scientists would do to study how can we make these vines better. And now these scientists are saying, well, we're going to do the same thing, and they study the same measurements, but just with more high-tech tools. I love this picture as well. Allison's done a great job showing, we've got our harrow, we've got different innovations. That beautiful heart is just gorgeous. It just shows how Wisconsin loves her cranberries and our lands. It really is a beautiful view. I've had CBS out to my marsh this fall, and it was an interesting interview. The photographer wanted a backdrop. And of course, cranberries have one of the most beautiful backdrops. It's a beautiful story. It connects to our history. It connects to our Thanksgiving story. It connects so many different families. And so he wanted this beautiful backdrop for his CBS interview. But he had to convince me that there was an added value for him being there. And so, of course, he took some pictures about 10 years ago and said, hey, I want to circle back. And he's an aerial photographer. So he's like, I really want to be able to just show the world different points of view on agriculture. And so it was a little scary at first because I hadn't seen the book. I really had to put my trust and benefit in the doubt that he had the best intentions. And I've recently learned, kind of revisited that you can have the best intentions, but sometimes the impact can have the foreseen impact that you were expecting. And so I think when he addresses, like the world does, how does agriculture mean to you? What does it mean to you? How is it healthy for you? How does it hurt you? And so his point of view is, is agriculture part of our world when it comes to communities? How does it impact communities? How does it impact your bodies? And I think he's bringing up a really good point. Now, whether or not you agreed with what he was saying or whether or not you're diving deep into those philosophical questions, the bigger question remains, how does agriculture impact each and every one of you? We know our food and our shelter and our clothing are all parts of our agricultural systems. But I think through the story that Allison put together and the story of my family as well is that agriculture has a much deeper connection to our hearts and to our families. And I think that's something that we have a great opportunity to celebrate in Wisconsin, given that we have such a strong agri-community system and food system here in Wisconsin. And the best way that I can shake that out is that it breaks down into economics. We support jobs. When we can go to our legislators and say, look, we're doing this for Wisconsin and we need you to go to bat for us. We want more funding in our schools, or we want better support so we can do apprenticeship programs and things like that. These kind of stories that we've shared together, Alice and I, and those in the cranberry industry, we can see the dots connect. We can see where there's joy working outside. We can see where lives have been benefited from being able to serve someone with the food that we produce. We can see how schools are benefiting because of the cranberry industries and the different farming ideas that we have, because we're different than dairy and we're different than livestock. So when you bring these different farmers together, it definitely seems like there's a common sense of community. So I want to say thank you to Allison for putting together a really great presentation for us tonight. I've talked quite a bit now, and I'd like to open this up for questions, and we can dive into some of these layers of cranberries. Thank you.
Does anybody grow cranberries as a garden thing, like for personal consumption?
So the question is, can you grow cranberries in your own garden as personal consumption? And it's possible, depending on where you live and how much time you have on your hands, because they're babies. They really are. Even though they're very, like I said, robust, and they have a sturdy, strong vine. They're very fragile with the weather. So you have to have a monitoring system for frost. And then you have to have a sprinkler system to be able to protect them during the frost, because there's a life cycle picture in the back. But on the very tip of a cranberry upright is the bud for next year. So we're growing 2 crops in one season. We're growing the cranberry crop, but we're also growing the vine growth for next year's crop. So the moment it's dead by frost, you not only kill the opportunity of the cranberry this year, but you're killing the growth for next year, which is why we are so married to our farms. So that's the number one thing, is having a system to be able to protect. The other thing is then, like anything in nature, Mother Nature wins, and so pests will follow. So you have to be able to protect your vines from things that might eat them. So that's another consideration. And then you have to have the right soil profile. So it's possible. And then I think those are the 3 things that probably in this area, if you were living in Wisconsin, some challenge.
So how big is an individual cranberry plant? How many years do they last? What was sandy? What is that?
So the cranberry plant is a vine, so it's as big as of the stretch of the vine you cut. But generally speaking, think of like a strawberry vine and a grapevine. The grapevines kind of grow up and then down, and then the strawberry vines grow across. So they're all interconnected. So there isn't just one. But if you can imagine a line of vines and then uprights all on top of it, and then of those uprights, you have the berries that grow from them. So when we plant, you have 2 different ways to plant. You can buy the plugs. So they're like smaller than this microphone, maybe half size. Or you would get vines from a propagator, or you could cut your own vines. So then you bale them up like a bale of hay, but it's cranberry vines. So it's over 100 pounds, very, very heavy. And they're wet. They cannot dry out or they'll die. So we keep sprinklers on them until they're ready. And then we put them in this machine, and it spits it out like a spreader. And then they're literally all chopped up. And then we take a disc machine, like a tractor with the implement that has like pizza pan rounds on the front. So it discs it in. So now we've put them into the ground. And then, you like my scientific expressions, then we get a roller, like you're making your cookies. So we got a roller implement on the front of the tractor. So we compound them down. And then we'll put the sprinklers on, because they're going to be thirsty and we want them to get, drink up right away. And then within a couple days, immediately they're rooting down and then popping up. So within a week or so, you can start to see that they've worked their way from the ground back up. And then sanding. So our sleeping beauties, they need a rest. They need a blanket to keep them protected. And when we sand when we have like a hockey rink or ice skating pond over top, so it's thick enough. It's 16 inches of ice. So we need to have enough weather and enough water, good weather and good water to create that ice. Then we'll use dump trucks. And there's like a mechanism on the back of the truck, and it'll sift the sand out as it's driving. So it'll drive lines up and down the bed. So now it's got this really nice brown layer of sand over the top. And then it snows, or it doesn't. And then in the springtime, it doesn't go away, like the sand will stay there. And in the springtime, it melts. So then as water melts, we'll pull the water off, and then the sand sifts down right into the vines. So then it helps the soil profile, it helps the root system, it knocks off any pesky vines. So we try to do about 20% of the marsh, so that in a 5-year process, we've done the whole marsh.
to bring up a question that you could view as a threat to your babies, but with climate change and things, fire is going to be more of, wildfire is going to be more and more of an issue in Wisconsin. Do you have any concern, what would wildfire do if it came into your area? And do you have any mitigation or anything else to keep it out of your?
Well, history is a good storyteller. So we've already had wildfires that have decimated our area in Cranmore and other areas due to Mother Nature and years of drought and not having access to the water. So since we've learned that, we have different ways to plan ahead. So maintaining our land is really, really important, and maintaining our ponds. But you can only do so much. You can't just magically add water. So we try to work with our neighbors and make sure that all of our ditches are open and not dammed up by beavers or fallen trees and things like that. So we maximize our water movement. We are very concerned if we don't have enough water, and that's just something that we have to be recognizing. This fall, we didn't run out, but it was very, very low. So it's working with our neighbors and making sure we fill up our ponds and then know how to calculate how much we need and how much we can let go to help our neighbor out, things like that. And this, back to your fire question, it would be devastating. There's nothing you can really do to stop a fire.
You couldn't flood or anything like that?
We do have water to flood. Yep, if you have enough water. But we also, I guess I didn't address this, we have support land next to our Cranberries. So in our land, my farm has 212 acres of cranberry vines and 2,000 acres of wooded wetland and wooded timber. So that isn't all wet. So that could go, and if then that goes, that may have a economic or a environmental impact in all kinds of ways. And we caretake for the animals and the critters and things like that. So it would be not only devastating to just our vines, but just to the whole ecosystem, as we know. It would be terrible.
And my one other question is, you've done a good job talking about the growers, the agriculturists, and things like that. You've put up slides there, and then above you, you've got a big support group from either UW or other state entities. And then over on the left, you have NRCS, USDA. I saw things like geneticists and things like that. Are you growers dependent upon the state, dependent upon the federal stuff to keep a healthy industry out there? Or if USDA, NRCS got cut, like 3,400 Forest Service people got cut last Thursday, basically, would the industry step in and hire a geneticist if the geneticist lost a job out there? Or would you just say, well, we'll have to live with this?
Those are really good questions, and the question that I'm hearing is how are we going to be prepared if our partners and team players are impacted by federal changes? And so we highly depend and value those who help us maintain a strong industry. And it goes from NRCS and DNR, who help us, make this relationship with our consumers. We are highly regulated. You often get questions about how we farm and how we're legitimate. So we need these partners to be able to certify and keep good relations between us, the land, and the public. I think it would be a challenge if we lost resources that help farmers. So, for example, we're always looking to ways to be sustainable. And if we have problems where we want to, not problems, here's an example. We're renovating a bed and we are sick of our above ground pipe. We want underground pipe. So there's programs that we can work with government agencies to say we want to be more sustainable and this is what we're willing to do, and they'll say we'll give you resources, we'll have someone come out and evaluate your farm, and we'll give you some insight on how you might be able to make the best choice to meet this initiative. So if we lost that resource, that would be it would probably slow down our progress. And so we're eager, Wisconsin growers and farmers are eager to pay our bills, and we're also eager to make sure that we're sustainable for the next generation. So I think we've recognized through history that we need to be able to keep up with the pressures and the demands in all regards. I think, Allison and her team at UW Extension and those scientists have really proven why Wisconsin is leading the state and in the nation rather in cranberry. So if you took away those resources, now the brain power behind those initiatives isn't there. So I know that we're always advocating for anything that where we could say, agriculture is really a bipartisan initiative, and what can we do to make us stronger? My grandpa always said there's only so much land in the world, and once it's gone, it's gone. So we know that as much as anybody else, that we only have so much land to work with, and we're trying to protect it to the best of our ability.
Where does your water come from? Is it deep wells, streams, seepage, that is the water?
It's all natural. None of it's a well. So whatever natural source you can think of. Some of it's, groundwater is natural. So let's think about that. In winters like this year, we want all the snow we can get because we had 2 or 3 seasons in a row of drought, like summer, fall, winter, 23 to 24. So we're still playing catch up, it seems like. So groundwater for sure, natural waters and rain. We want to keep our reservoirs healthy, things like that. So our support land has the reservoirs on it. Just natural. Mm-hmm.
Are they your reservoirs, or is it like out west where there'll be government reservoirs to release, or is it, every farmer would be inefficient to have their own reservoirs and things like that. It has to be a cooperative someplace. Is that, or does every farmer have their own water reservoir?
I would say in cranberries, you'd have to have your own water source or access to a water source, or your plants wouldn't make it. So you'd have to have it somewhere near you. There are water cooperatives in some areas of the state that work together because the sharing of the water is so important. But I think it's more valuable to maybe visualize that cranberry farms typically have the water available on their land. So they'll have 100 acres and then 1,000 acres of land, and that's where their water source is. And then they use drainage ditches and culverts.
How much of a problem is deer to your crop? And secondly, how organically can you produce your crop?
So deer are pests and not favorable to cranberries because 2 things. They will walk into it and find so much joy. But they knock the berries off. They knock the blossoms off. They're clumsy. They're not light. They don't step lightly. They must be really cozy because then they'll bed down in them. And then they're doing more damage. So in cranberry farms that are really close to perimeters of wooded areas, you could actually work with NRCS and do a cost share program so that you can keep the critters in the woods where they belong and keep the cranberries protected. The bear like to eat the honey. We have bees. We rent bees in the blossom season. So again, if you're near those wooded areas, the bears just love to attack those hives. We don't own them. We rent them. So it's detrimental to the bee owner if you've got bear coming in and destroying your hives. So there's other ways that we have to work together with Mother Nature and protect each other. And then the other question was organic. You can. Certainly cranberries are native, right? They're native as what's ever grown here in Wisconsin. But the bugs, Mother Nature wins there again. So I tend to say no one wants a bug in your berry when you go to the grocery store, and it'll deplete your yield. So it is possible. And it's not, organic doesn't mean it's chemical free. It's just a different rate. And it may be labeled slightly different. The efficacy is different, and clearly the yield is different. And so you have to be in the right position to be an organic grower. First of all, you have to have contained water so that if you have water that has been treated with a non-organic farm that can't infiltrate into yours. So you have to have a secluded area. So geographically, you have to be set up the right way, and then I think your business model has to be set up to be able to ride the storms of those pests or have other profit revenues that offset.
What kind of pests attack your plants?
Disease, so plant disease and bugs.
Any other,
Can you speak to
any
the
other
labor?
animals?
Geese are a problem. And muskrats, they dig the holes. The geese do the same damage as the deer. And you know what beaches look like. Yeah.
So what are your labor inputs? I suspect that seasonally it's pretty intense, and then there's times when you,
It does ebb and flow, yeah. And I'm learning a lot about humankind in my role as HR manager, as I recruit and retain and sometimes have to let employees go. And so we have seasonalities of pushes and times where we're slower. So this is our slower time where we don't need as many people. So we're in the shop, we're doing equipment repair, we're sanding, we're going to workshops and things like that. Then in the springtime, we got to get that pipe out if it's not underground. So that means I have to pay for more employees to come and take that pipe out, which is why we're incented to get underground pipe when and where we can. And then planting, if you choose to plant, so remember the perennial, you don't have to plant, but you plant if you think you want to make your margins, your profit margins go up. So if it works for your business model, then you pull out the old vines and you plant in new ones, but you need extra crews to help facilitate that process. And then of course, harvest. So it does ebb and flow. And the problem that we're seeing though is that, farming can be taxing. It's taxing to the body, it's taxing to the mind, it's taxing to your families by the remoteness or the lack of amenities. When you're a cranberry farmer, you have two families, your own family, let me say farm first, and then your farm family. So it's, you're very, very dedicated. You often live right on the farm. A frost alarm goes off and you have immediate responsibilities. Like I said, we watch the weather every day. So it can, it's not for everyone, and we're seeing the turnover happen more often. And the turnover is either because somebody else is paying them more on another farm, but we don't want to do that to each other. We've even said it, this is not healthy and it's not good if we're taking each other's employees. But how do you find employees? So we've been really looking at different ways to grow that next generation and reach out to the younger generation in the high schools. And then we're also trying to find valuable workforce where maybe you're retired or you're a veteran, but you still have talents and time to offer. And it's a challenge because the work is unique. And like everything in relationships, there has to be a match. And if it's not a good match, the employee could be a liability. It could be a liability to them, and it could be a liability to the farm. So that's something that I've been really studying is, how do we grow this agricultural identity for work? And how do we show that it's valuable? How do we show that it's a lifestyle career? How do we show that you can have the joy and wealthy success? And that's something that all of us farmers are starting to look at while we try to innovate out of some of those tasks. Like underground pipe for us is less people. In the dairy world, it might be that robotic milker, things like that.
So going back to your ethnographic map and the immigrants, so immigrants from Europe didn't have any experience with cranberries. Was there a particular group that kind of glommed on the cranberries, or did it vary by county?
Like the Hmong or something?
Yeah, so the question is, was there that's a really good question. Was there a cultural group that had a law of attraction and success in cranberry? I think it's a region in Europe. I don't know if it's one particular, so I think it's any one of our relatives and our heritage in Wisconsin. I think they understood how plows worked. So if you understood how a horse and a plow worked, remember this is 1850, right? So understanding that, like, okay, this makes sense. I think the reality though is you had to have money. You had to have money to buy the land, and you had to be quick enough to get it and secure it. And so you have the haves and the have-nots. So that's a distinguishing difference at that time era. So I think what I see is some of those 6-7 generation farms, someone had already established family in Milwaukee or the Madison area, and now they were coming up because they heard of a job opportunity. So it was very much like the Hmong community. You definitely saw in our heritage story, they followed each other. The Gaynor brothers are Irish. And so in that history book, it shows some of the political history with some of Johnny Gaynor's impact with legislation and some of the influencers he was connected with. And Wisconsin, we know, was very active in this early part of our nation, and a lot of great minds came out of Wisconsin, and Mr. Gaynor had connections with them, and they definitely stuck together. And it says so in the book. And so I think that was interesting, how you got things done and how laws became laws and how land became land. There was definitely some intellectual planning, and I think it was who you knew within the cultural groups.
Well, you may not know this, but this very town, Waupaca right here, in the 1880s, was the potato capital of the world, okay? And that would have never happened until the railroad came through in 1871, because they had good potatoes, but they had to sell them to pig farmers, and they didn't have any markets. And then it came together when the railroad came in, and he said, hey, there's markets down there. You mentioned your farm, or the Gaynor farm, was 1876. Is that tied in at all with, what did you do with this fresh crop to get it to markets?
We put it on a train.
Okay, so
Yep.
you couldn't have that industry, really, until you had a railroad coming through.
There was an industry, so let's talk about that real quick. There absolutely was an industry. They were traded as a value commodity, and it was the native tribal nations that did that first. So they absolutely critically showed that cranberries could be used in commerce and could be moved along where they needed to be. So they not only fed themselves as a community, and so I've recently learned that the Ho-Chunk had quite a spread. So they had origin here in Wisconsin, but they have a footprint that goes up to Canada and down to the Mississippi. And in doing so, I think those cranberries and that heritage followed. Clearly, cranberries are only grown up this way, but I think they were traded and sold. So I think that gave the foundation. Then all of a sudden someone said, well, mind you, we know lands changed and ownership changed. And then I think social initiatives changed. So how the tribal nations approached land and agriculture is different than how Europeans approached it. So then you see different practices. So it's not to say Native Americans didn't know how to ditch and didn't know how to maximize utility or profit margins. Maybe it goes without saying that they chose not to do it for their own reasons. And that's something I'm looking to explore a little bit more, is our heritage in cranberry is twofold. We know that it's native here to Wisconsin and native to the tribes, or there's no reason we would have ever started picking them or finding value in the land. So they, in that book, it showed that people were buying up land in Cranmore because there was gold in cranberries, and people were being shot for picking cranberries out of season or trespassing. I mean, it went that to the extent. So it's, someone showed somebody that there was real value in it, and I think there was patterns of moving it along through the railroad and through rivers. So we know in Wisconsin we're full of rivers, and in my area we had fur trading. So anywhere, I always say, anywhere around the world, if there's a river, there's always a story. Because rivers draw people, it draws animals, it's where the healthiest soil is, it's where life happens.
They dry them?
That's where the pemmican came from, I believe. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they used cranberries with meat and things like that, and made almost like a sausage. Now, which brings up, I think dried cranberries are within my lifetime. I don't think we had those when I was a kid. When did that industry?
Craisins, yeah. We were, so Ocean Spray is proud to say that we invented this product in the late 90s as an initiative. I think it was already, research and development is something that's, Ocean Spray takes high value in, and it just happened to be where we were reaching a surplus in the market. Too many berries, not enough buyers, and so we needed to invent ourselves into something. So they played around with drying a cranberry, and now we have craisins, but only Ocean Spray can call them craisins. Anyone else who will dry them and sweeten them can call them sweetened dried cranberries.
Okay.
Where today is the processing done? After they get on the truck, where do they go and get frozen or canned or juiced or whatever?
So I can speak on behalf of Ocean Spray and my community. So we have receiving stations. So you first, as a grower, need to have a contract with a handler. So someone needs to buy your fruit. So your handler has a receiving station. So our fruit will then go from our trucks to the Babcock receiving station, and we also have one in Wisconsin Rapids, and there's also one in Toma. So if you live up north, you're taking a really long drive, and you're not driving a dump truck. So now you need a CDL driver, and you're investing either in renting the truck or owning it, one of the two. So that's the decision you have to think about. We live really close to the receiving station, so we just use our own dump trucks, and then we add extra sides to it so the berries don't fall out. So we call them boxes. Put a cranberry box on there. And then, so that's receiving. So then every receiving station needs to be able to figure out, well, once I clean the fruit, it's going to rot if I don't do something with it. So you need a freezer partner. So Ocean Spray works with Americold, which is a national freezer organization around the world that takes all kinds of produce that needs to be frozen. So your potatoes, any of your crops, like carrot, cucumber, pea, all the things that Wisconsin grows, they all have to go to a freezer. So now you're in the freezer, and now at some point your handler says, I need to sell this commodity. I need to find where this is going to go to make it to your table. So then they may sell it to an ingredient buyer. So I'm an ingredient buyer, so now I have the cranberries. Now I'm going to find a cereal company. So now as the ingredient owner, I'm going to sell it to General Mills. So now you have different parties that will be part of this buying and selling process to get it to the manufacturer and so on. So Ocean Spray has a manufacturing plant in Kenosha for juice. Mariani has a sweetened dried cranberry facility in Wisconsin Rapids, which is a great employer. And then we actually have a cranberry growing family, local, generational, that have upcycled. So they are not Ocean Spray. They are a trucking company. They're farmers first. Well, they think they were truckers, and then they got into farming. And so they haul their own fruit to their own freezer, and then they make their own fruit. So that's quite the business model. So that would be Badger State Fruit Processing and Gardner Trucking and Gardner Cranberry. So that's another way to, but that's scale. So someone asked, could you be a brand new cranberry grower, first generation? It'd be really hard because you have to buy the land. The land's really expensive. And the land value isn't just the land, it's the value of your vines. If you're doing hybrid vines that are pushing out 400 barrels an acre, it's a lot, they could be $12,000 a ton. And we plant, I think 2 to 3 ton an acre, and our beds are between 3 and 5 acres. So it adds up really fast. So not to be discouraging, but I think that's where the value of generational farms is something to celebrate, because unless you are generational, it's probably a larger company that you're going to start seeing buying up the farms.
How hard is to keep your kids on the land? When they get to be teenagers, you have to tie them in a basement or something? Or is there enough interest that
the question is there enough cranberry kids to supplement? I think that's a good question. I think the world is changing so quickly. I'm the last generation, so I was born before the internet. And I can see the world, I see it, and how it has transpired is different for my kiddos. So we have 2 kids, a boy and a girl, and I have no idea if they're going to want to work on the farm or not. There's something really beautiful about being a part of a farming family, but there's also this, blessing that we have, that so long as you have your freedom to be able to use your talents and your privileges and your passions, maybe the farm isn't your calling. And so I think that's where my husband and I feel that it's my calling, it was my passion. But mind you, it wasn't entitled to me. So even though I'm generational, my parents and my grandpa said, and my grandmother too, like, this cannot be your backup plan. It's too hard. you won't survive. Family farming and farming in general, we're at the mercy of the market. We're at the mercy of Mother Nature. It's a blessing to be able to live in an agri community, but sometimes it's a fishbowl, and there's no surprise parties in a fishbowl. You get it? So, there's sacrifices that you have to be okay with. And so I think you wish the best for your child. I think my reservation I'm not alone in that. I know a lot of dairy farmers, and I think it's a struggle about trying to get the farm to succeed for the next generation. And then the other question is, well, how many children can your farm support? And that problem is getting bigger and bigger because you're having higher costs and your profit margins aren't as big. And so now instead of having the ability to support 3 families on your farm, maybe you can only support 1. So maybe that child who had always wanted to be the owner at a certain age is now realizing I still have to keep working that second job, and maybe I'll never be the owner or never have what my parents had, because the models are changing. So that's a big question, and I think a lot of us wonder how and what will that look like for us.
Back to my processing question, if I buy a bag of cranberries in the grocery store, where did it likely come from?
So if you're buying, the question is, if you buy a bag of cranberries, fresh cranberries, where are they coming from? If they're ocean spray, they're coming across the street from my neighbors. Mostly, I have 2 neighbors that do fresh fruit. There's only a handful of fresh fruit growers in the world, and Wisconsin has 5 of them, I think. So it's a very, 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 very high possibility that they're coming right out of Wisconsin Rapids. If they're not, they're coming out of, actually there's 3 out of Wisconsin Rapids, 4 out of Wisconsin Rapids. So Twin Lake Cranberry, Wisconsin River Cranberry packages, Ocean Spray, Mariani, I think no, they don't do fresh fruit. Habelman Brothers, and they're from Toma.
So in Wisconsin, it's likely it was grown in Wisconsin.
Yes, I would say 100%. I would bet you $1. No, I would bet you more than that. That there's no way they're shipping in. And the other thing is, our berries are bigger than other berries. I don't know if you know this, but because of the vine varieties that we have in their growing conditions, typically Wisconsin cranberries are bigger, which we have a really great product for craisins. The bigger the berry, the bigger the craisin. So you want Wisconsin cranberries, and we always can tell if they're when you travel, if they're smaller or what color they are. Some of those cranberry growers will be like, oh, that's from this area or from that area.
Now, we buy our cranberries like a 10-pound box once a year coming through Toma, on 21 there. Is there a lot of those places to get, or is that a rarity? We drive into the farm and buy them right on the farm.
I would say probably more rare, because if they're selling it to you, they've probably already sorted them, so you have to have the time and the staff to be able to make them presentable to
they're sorted. The boxes have been sorted and everything. We buy the box and pay our money.
So most farms don't want to do that, or they're not fitted for that. They don't have the equipment to harvest them that way, or they don't have the sorting machines. So I would say if you find them on the roadside, buy as many as you can, and then fit as many as you can in your freezer. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, everyone.